So again, thank you very much. And without any further ado, I will ask Renisha to speak to us, please. And a very warm welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Just let me know if I'm audible.
You are? Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Please provide me 1 second to just project my presentation and I'll commence in. Please to inform me whether the presentation is visible.
It is.
Okay. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much for having me here as a representative of Women on Farms Project. I am Lanisha Frank, and I am the coordinator for our Women's Health and Empowerment Program at Women on Farms Project. So who is Women on Farms Project? Women on Farms Project is a non-governmental organization, feminist organization that works with women living and working on farms. And women living and working on farms are mostly marginalized and vulnerable groups in the country, in rural communities. And there are various structure and systemic factors that contribute towards this vulnerability and marginalization, which I'll discuss in the next slide. Um, and it's important to note that these structural and systemic factors and barriers and challenges are also key drivers of gender-based violence that significantly exacerbates the vulnerability of women living on farms. And these drivers includes, firstly, the seasonality of women's work, agricultural work or labor. So it is important to understand the context and that women living on farms in particularly are seasonal workers, which mean that they only work for a certain period of the year. And the remaining months for the year, they are unemployed, which consequently they then become financially and economically dependent on their male partners, on their husbands. And so they become dependent because of the seasonality of their work. But more so, it is also one of the key drivers is also women's insecure tenure rights. And so it is important to understand that women are seasonal workers, whereby men are often and most of the time they are permanent workers on the farm. And because of the permanency of their employment, the housing contractual structures are then in favor of the men. So which means that the farmers then places men in the position of power, and this is power over, which means they are in a position where they have housing, and women unfortunately do not get the same privileges, women living on farms. And often you find that it is difficult for women to leave abusive relationships, abusive marriages, abusive homes, because they often say, but where will my children go to? What will happen to me and my family? We have nowhere else to go. We are dependent on this man, or we are dependent on him because why? Firstly, he's perceived as the breadwinner, he's in control and have power over the house and the housing structure. So these are key and pertinent drivers of GBV to understand, and also the interconnection between them and how they exacerbate the precariousness of women living on farms. More so, we have also we have women farm women living on farms in rural areas working experience extreme systemic challenges. One of them is access to services, services including SAPS, the police, the justice system, hospitals, healthcare access, but also the issue of the geographical location where women are so far, farms are so far distant from services. We have instances where women have to hike to get to the nearest magistrate court. They have to hitchhike to a hospital. And these systemic challenges that we are referring to in terms of the justice system, SAPS, also is it's, of which are includes SAPS, whereby SAPS are under trained when it comes to cases of gender-based violence, where they would inform women that no, domestic violence or gender-based violence is household problems. It is problems between a man and a woman. It's marital issues that needs to be sorted out. That is not the jurisdiction of SAPS. Once again, inefficient responses to cases of GBV, femicide, also under-resourced police stations in rural communities, whereby women would call for help, and the responses will be that unfortunately there aren't enough police vehicles to attend to cases of gender-based violence, to attend to cases of various forms of violence. And once again, we can see women living on farms are once again marginalized, once again treated with injustice and met with injustice. The justice system also further drives this invulnerability, whereby women would go to magistrates' courts. And many a times we find that women do not understand an application of a protection order because it is in English, and the predominant language in rural communities is Afrikaans, and women are then intimidated by these extensive, intense words and things that are on this application. And once again, they feel dismayed and they leave it. They are also met with intimidation. Imagine a woman already traumatized, going through so much trauma, experiencing violence, and then coming to a place which is supposed to be a place of rescue, met with further intimidation. For example, where security officials have received this amount of power, where they ask women, so what is your case, why are you at court today, what do you want? And instantly that woman feels discriminated. She's further traumatized because she has to say her story, share her story in front of a lot of other people. Also, whereby some courts have no because of the rural setting and because of under-resourced magistrate courts, police stations, hospitals, you'll see that there is no offices or trauma rooms where women can go, where women can state their situations. So once again, we see that women living on farms in rural communities are once again, they experience various systemic challenges, and further exacerbates their precariousness, their vulnerability, and the impact of violence on them. So, with all these issues, all these structural and systemic challenges, all these injustices, what is the role of women on farms, and how do we respond? How do we respond, and what are our interventions? So, Women on Farms project capacitates women. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we work with women, farm women that live and work on farm. So Women on Farms project capacitate women to know their right, to claim those rights. So women go through various capacity building workshops where they are conscientized around what is my right to health, what is my right in terms of the Domestic Violence Act, what is my right and how do I exercise it, how do I claim my rights. So women are conscientized, women are capacitated, and we believe that women have agency. So we merely amplify and facilitate a process of amplifying that agency which women have, so that women can ultimately go out and advocate against injustices, advocate against systemic challenges, failures, where women can go and organize themselves to advocate and lobby against various injustices that they experience. And once again, we can see women in Rawsonville, women in various small farming areas coming together, organizing themselves, having the confidence to speak up, to say that enough is enough. They have had it with the inefficient response of SAPSA and lack of training of SAPS towards cases of gender-based violence. More so, Women on Farms project also lobbies, campaigns, again, and also as part of our 16 days of activism campaigns against gender-based violence. And these campaigns look at various thematic issues and challenges within the rural context. And once again, women are provided with a platform and an opportunity to raise those concerns, to advocate, to be a representative of other women also living on farms. And therefore, we once again we say that women have agency, and therefore the capacity building workshops are so imperative and pertinent, because these platforms allow women to raise their concerns, to raise and to make aware that we know what our rights are. But more so, as part of capacitating women, Women on Farms have also deemed it important to raise conscientization and awareness and training with men, boys, and girls. And the training with the GBV training with men has been received very well by men, conscientizing them around the issues of power, patriarchy, gender norms and socialization, how men have been socialized to think, to behave, the issue of power over, and also all these issues of discrimination and gender-based violence. And the men has really received these workshops well, including the boys. Allowing boys to understand. One of the boys said, we were taught that girls should be seen and not heard. And instantly, we were, as Women on Farms, able to break those generational socializations, how boys are taught, how girls are brought up, and then also around the issue of consent. What is consent? My no is no, my yes is yes. In very childlike friendly approaches. And once again, these are just some reflection of our girls, educating them and just once again empowering and capacitating them. Your voice has power. You matter. Your no is no. You have the right to say no. And more importantly, and in addition to the conversation around gender-based violence, the issue of women's seasonal work, labor, insecure tenure rights, systemic injustices, these structural factors that also contribute to women's vulnerability and to the issue of gender-based violence is the issue of food insecurity in the house. And we can see that, and what we have found is that women during the off season, the household is food insecure. So the issue of food insecurity is quite significant during that time. And so is the issue of gender-based violence. And in Women on Farms project, we have what we call an intersectional approach, where we don't look at an issue just in its individuality, but we look at the whole, we look at everything intersectionally and how they all are intersectional. And so is another issue which comes into the discussion is the issue of food insecurity, which is extreme, and the issue of seasonal hunger, to be actually in specific. And as a result, Women on Farms project also capacitates women with knowledge around agroecological food gardens. And women are trained on how to start their own food gardens as a response to seasonal hunger, food insecurity, so that women are not economically and financially too dependent on men, but that women have these agroecological gardens to feed the families, and also healthy meals, looking at health in also in added to this discussion. And these are produce that has been planted and harvested by women. And women also then start eating from their gardens. And we can see that it has contributed significantly and successfully in a decline to women's dependency on their male partners during the off season, and the issue of food insecurity. So once again, we can see this one of our women in a garden, very proud of her plants and her seeds and a beautiful produce. These are just some reflections on how women are brought together. These are women from different areas, rural areas, farms, that came together, undergoing a practical training on how to start their own food gardens. And then also the women share their produce amongst one another in their household, and just they form a very good connection and sense of belonging together. Um, and in response to the aforementioned driver, which I've discussed, the issue of insecure tenure rights, which is also another form of violence. And we can always, and what we often see is that women are often impacted more when it comes to evictions. And once again, looking at gender-based violence and violence not as just gender-based violence and how we understand it, but looking at all these forms of violence and structural violence, because evictions form part of violence, because it is a violent process, and it is traumatizing to that woman that have lived her life long on the farm, and to be violently taken out from an environment that she have known all her life is another form of violence. And therefore I often say violence it's everywhere. And should be seen in this broader spectrum and this broader perspective and lens. So yet again, another form of violence and trauma which women living and working on farms experience. Women on Farms also creates platforms, not just on a community-based level, but also on a national government, local government, district government, different spheres of government, where women are able to organize themselves, women are able to advocate on various injustices, and also ultimately forms part of recommendations to policies, national policies. And therefore, it is so important that women are conscientized, because then they are able to eloquently articulate the various gaps in policies, and how policies do not cover and speak for representatives of rural communities, especially women. So once again, on all spheres of government, women also take this knowledge and go into the communities, go and create awareness. They spread awareness to other women, and also therefore ultimately each one teach one. Teaching another woman did not know, but actually, I'm being abused. Actually, this was abuse all along. So the women take this and they move and they go with it and place it forward. The information and the learnings and the capacitation. And here once again, women are able to what we have is we call government engagements, and these engagements brings various stakeholder entities, partners, Department of Justice, Department of Social Development, SAPS, and various other institutions, and how we can create a collective partnership and response to the challenges that are present within rural communities, and in particularly it affecting farm women specifically. And so, in conclusion, women living and working on farms experience various challenges as discussed. But there's one saying that they have that keeps them going, and it is, you strike a woman, you strike a rock. And this is a saying the women maintain and they keep. And these women, although they experience these various challenges and injustices, marginalization, they continue to fight and they continue to set forward and advocate for the rights of other women living on farms that do not have a voice, that do not have a voice or a platform. They take this forward. So herewith, I want to say thank you very much. I give over to the host.
Thank you so much for that very informative and very well anchored presentation. I'm very grateful for it. Thank you. I ask again that those on the webinar make a note of any comments, any questions, any contributions that you would like to make. Write it down, don't forget. And also, while you're writing, maybe uh, use the opportunity to also just jot down one or two learnings from that you've had from this presentation. So please do that for a minute, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask Sheriff to please prepare for your presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'm so honored to be on this platform. My name is Sheriff Ramwabi, and I am located in Zolani, a small community just outside of Robertson. I work with Rural Women Assembly. I work mostly with the healing circles that has been established within Rural Women Assembly. So just to best describe Rural Women Assembly, Rural Women Assembly is best described as a self-organized network or alliances of national rural women's movements, assemblies, cross-rooted organizations, and chapters of mixed peasants unions, federations, and movements across 9 provinces in South Africa. We fight for food sovereignty, land access, seeds, and sovereignty entirely. We are our own liberators. Gender-based violence is not only a personal issue.
Sorry, Sheriff, can I just interfere there for a moment? Somebody's got background noise emanating and it's interfering with your presentation. So if anybody who has something going on in the background, I think they've switched it off. Thank you very much. Sorry for the disturbance. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Apologies for that. As I was saying, gender-based violence is not a personal issue. It's a political issue, it's a social issue, and it's an economic issue. When we are fighting for gender-based violence, we are fighting for access to land for women. We're fighting for food sovereignty, dignity, and equality. As Rural Women Assembly Campaign has mobilized local gatherings to combat and confront on how inequality and economic justice keeps cycles of violence alive. And so I have just created a small illustration to just give a background. So as Rural Women Assembly, sorry for the background noise. As Rural Women Assembly, we are a self-organized rural women's movement in 11 countries in the SADC region, meaning that GBV is one of our pillars and is also, it's connected to a lot of violence that women face. And so within Rural Women Assembly, we started a scorecard to find out exactly in our communities, in the rural areas, what are the issues and the grassroots issues that affect women. So we went on by conducting a scorecard, and this was not just in South Africa and in the 7 provinces that we are active in, but it was also a regional scorecard that we undertook. Within the scorecard, we visited local organizations, we visited schools, we visited traditional authorities, just to really get a better understanding of the root causes of gender-based violence in the communities. And so we were able to collaborate with local organizations, gender-based violence ambassadors in communities, and we're able to really see that there are gaps within the system, and this gap has really cracked to a point whereby survivors and victims of gender-based violence have been sidelined. This also counts the LGBTQ+I community members and even the disabled members of our community. They've been sidelined, whether it be from children or even adults, and even the older age. We are all affected. And so the core community drives of this would be that unemployment, poverty, school dropouts, government negligence, and these are just some of the drivers of the economic and the violence that is just impacting women directly. In the rural communities, struggles feed into another. When one family faces hunger, young girls often are the first to pay the price. Marriages is frequently utilized as it's utilized as an escape from poverty. Early child marriages, poverty and hunger, early school dropouts, and government negligence are just part of that systemic oppression that women are just generationally are just being impacted by. And so as Rural Women Assembly, we wanted to highlight our issues as rural women in South Africa. I just want to highlight a few statistics that we recovered in one of the campaigns that we're running on the reality of early child brides in South Africa. So as you can see above that, 207 illegal marriages or child illegal marriages in South Africa in 2021 was 188 and 19 grooms. These are just young children. These are young adults. And below the surface, we have, pillars that are standing in God to protect and make sure that these systemic oppressions, they stay put. So for instance, with the customary laws that have loopholes, that in your traditional areas, these marriages are conducted because of poverty, because of circumstances in families, and they are seen as a resolution. Then you will see that in our own proposed marriage bill, it seeks to prohibit all marriages under 18 with absolutely zero expectations. At this rate in South Africa, we need young women thriving and not young women being put into household chores. And so as Ruwa Women Assembly highlights that teenage pregnancies, child marriages, early school dropouts, bullying in schools are just part of the violence that young women are currently facing. If I can move to the next slide. So during our scorecard roadshow, we were able to also identify survivors that shared really extraordinary but also saddening stories. And we identified the gaps that even though women report their cases, they're not taken to, they're not being prioritized. So for instance, here was one lady that opened up about her case, and she was willing for me to actually just add this. I have added an anonymous name to it, but she opened up to say that she had been violated and she had to wait a whole year while her case was being built up. And there are many cases like this in South Africa. There are many cases like this in the rural communities where it involves young children, the LGBTQ plus communities, the elderly even. And these cases take forever to be resolved. The sentencing itself, it's short for the perpetrators. And eventually at the end of this whole line, the perpetrator still walks free. So survivors have, and even victims, and even in domestic situations in household, we have completely lost hope in the justice system. It fails us. It does not represent us as the rural people. Working even with healing circles, which was also established through the scorecard, because we could see that there are gaps where survivors or victims of gender-based violence, there is no spaces, there's no safe spaces for them. And even in community spaces, it's not safe for them to share their experiences, because as a result of the justice system and even our local police, when you get to a police station, they judge you, whether you are drunk, whether you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, whether you be a male reporting your case there, you're already judged before you can actually give your story, and you're not approached in a manner of being understood and actually to assist you to the fullest capacity. And so we saw this as a very huge gap, not just in our own community, but also in South Africa entirely. So we ventured out into sorry for that. So we ventured. Sorry, it's me. Apologies for that. There seems to be two sheriffs in this link.
Can anybody amongst the panelists offer some technical support, please?
Sheriff, perhaps just check where did you log in from, then just log out of that device and remain on one device.
My apologies for that background noise. One of the sisters joined on the same link as mine. I really apologize for that. But just to continue with some of the work
Thank you.
that we did. So through the scorecard, we're able to collaborate with local organizations and other platforms like the Thuthuzela Center. So we saw the Thuthuzela Center as a platform for women, even for us to really better learn what do they really support victims with, support gender-based violence with, especially in communities. So the Thuthuzela Center is stationed or located in the Worcester area, meaning that most of the cases that they cover are in that area. So when you come down to our side in the Langeberg area going down, we really don't have a lot of assistance. And so we collaborated with Advocate Cindy, who strongly agrees with our demands as Rural Women Assembly, to say that we demand that life imprisonment without parole for perpetrators and femicide rapists. I just want the rest of the audience to understand that these demands are coming from the women. It's coming from survivors. It's coming from the rural communities that are unheard of, the voices that have been oppressed by husbands, uncles, just to name a few. So we set out to have demands that women can really put emphasis on, especially when they're speaking for themselves. Because one of the mottos that we have in Rural Women Assembly and with alliance with other organizations is that we speak for ourselves. We are our own liberators. And so having these demands also gives women an understanding of why are we fighting for this? Why should we be heard? Why should we have access to information like this? Information of predators that are just walking free in society. This should be public information for us, even for schools to be aware of who they are actually employing. And so these are the demands that came from the women. So just to move on to the next slide, I'm just looking at time. As a national footprint and drive of local champions. So just to give you a background, as Rural Women Assembly, having this scorecard, we were able to also involve young people in communities to be the champions of their communities, to start up study or healing circles in their own communities, So in this journey, we're able to have 6 provincial dialogues conducted. And this was on the early child marriages, on gender-based violence, on policies that women are unaware of. And we used healing circles to popularize this education. So we use most of the time popular education in our healing circles to unpack issues, to unpack exactly what are the actual root causes of our local issues. We were able to have plus minus rural women survivors, traditional leaders, and healthcare workers. So within the healing circles, we work closely with healthcare workers. We have identified that we have champions in our communities. We have healthcare workers that work with gender-based violence, that work with community development programs. And so we saw that as a link for us to not make this, as I said previously, that GBV is not a personal issue, but this is a community issue. This is a country issue. So within these healing circles, we facilitate not only trainings of trainers, but we also take our champions and our survivors, even in our healing circles, to platforms like the Tutuzela, for them to hear this knowledge for themselves, for them to also understand that we're not standing alone, but also having collaborations are going to assist us to be able to voice out our issues. Our biggest challenge regarding this, the healing circles, would be, limitations of resources, and also to just say that having support from the community itself, them seeing that this is actually something good for young people or survivors or local community leaders, to really better understand the actual core and problems that women are facing. Thank you for the next slide. So just to mention the healing circles that we have, we've got 2 in the Western Cape, one with young people and the other with a mixed ages. Then in Free State, we've got 3 healing circles that are mostly run by young women. Then in Gauteng, we've got 2 healing circles also there. Also, they are supported by young people and run by young women with the support of provincial leaders. In the Eastern Cape, we also have 2, which are also supported by our local leaders. So local leaders also don't work alone. It's local leaders. We've got champions that are working with them. Within the champions, we've got others that are supporting the work. So essentially, with this pilot of healing circles, it's to promote, not to just break the trauma cycle that women are facing, or just to retell stories in order to do a double violence, if one could call it. But we use this space to educate each other. So we use tools like film screening. So understanding a certain film from a certain perspective, how to confront conflict, how to resolve conflict, and so on. We also have access to markets where women are able to see themselves outside of the violence, outside of the trauma, actually taking up their own issues and local issues and strengthening each other. So community dialogues are one of the ways that we actually make sure that each and every healing circle is capacitated. We have also sessions where we just really just relieve and storytell. I think experiences for us has been the most success because we're able to document our stories. We're able to directly give a perspective of a survivor and a victim. And we're able to dive into a trauma and really understand that most of these issues are not singular issues, but they're connected. And one violence can lead to another. And so I think the healing circles have been one of the most active and very strong pillars that we've had in the GBV work campaign. This has also allowed us to transfer information that is in desks in Cape Town, that we can bring them right here in the communities where women are. And we've got seasonal women that are working. We are working with young women that are still studying. We're working with young daughters still in school. So we prioritize in not just creating spaces for a certain age, but to go throughout the actual violence, where it starts, how it can actually move from one generation to another, and how it actually impacts the rest of the community. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide. I'll just do a small summary on this one. So one of the screenplays that we shared with the Healing Circle was, to connect ecofeminism and resilience. And so in most cases, we're not all familiar with these terms. And so how we try to unpack them in the Healing Circles is by, sharing a film screening that we can all look at and then reflect upon it. And then also give out, what other way could you have conducted this? If you were in that situation, how would you have handled this? And so I just created a small illustration. So the background story was of a woman that was attacked by a crocodile, but then she continues farming. Essentially, the elephants assisted her from actually being consumed by the crocodile. So she was attacked by a crocodile, and then a group of elephants ran across just by the area where she was bitten. And in that event happening, the crocodile let go of her leg, and she was able to pull herself out of the way, and the elephants passed. So this short film story gave women a narrative of working together with Mother Nature, working together with animals. So in one instant, one would have killed the crocodile as a form of violence. So you unpack these small scenarios in order to also identify that violence also came in a boat. It came with guns. It came with policies that eliminated women from having a say. And so we are saying that there's a better way. There's a better way of working with the ecosystem. There's a better way for women to work with the land and still look after Mother Nature and animals. And so usually we use like small illustrations to just connect gender-based violence to land, water, seeds, and food sovereignty. Okay. Okay, so I'll just move to the way forward. So part of Rural Women Assembly as our strategic plan provincially is to, build capacity. So to continue with the work and strengthen what we're currently doing. So we have decided to have more training of trainers on with gender-based violence champions. So we need more young people. We need more community members that want these spaces for our community members, because also having collaborations with SAPSN during 16 days of activism also has limitations, because it also tells them that we will only collaborate with them, or they will only collaborate with us during that time, when we know violence is continuously throughout the whole year. Every second there's a woman that is being raped. Every second there's a young child being bullied at school. And so through this education and capacity building, training of champions, going into schools, starting small gardens, just to create that sort of environment where women and children and communities are visually aware, are doing the action and not waiting for somebody to do something, but are taking issues into their own hands. So, and one of the other things is resource mobilization. So to secure local fundings for ongoing sustainable GBV work. So I just like to highlight that we also want to make sure that women can, sell their own veggies. They can create their own craft and sell their own craft. This also really breaks that financial dependency. And these are one and a lot of examples that I can share that, as a way forward, these are the small initiatives that we can actually do in our communities. It doesn't really have to stick to one community, but we can mimic these sort of collaborations and finding funds within the different collaborations. So to also amplify women's voices, children's voices, the elderly, young women, young adults, the LGBTQ plus communities that are continuously being excluded, the disabled community that is continuously excluded. And so we want to increase capacity building, resource mobilization, amplifying the issues that are in our areas, to create visible campaigns that are going to speak for rural women, that are going to speak for rural communities. So lastly, then, to really connect land rights and gender-based violence. It is one key pillar that we're seeing that it cannot be, they link. They can't be separated. Women without land are women that are very insecure. And in these platforms where we can change policies and influence policies, we need to better understand and then to share why we think that this is right. Why do we think that GBV is also linked to access to land, food sovereignty, access to water, access to resources, and for our communities to actually be prioritized by our local municipalities, and to create spaces for survivors. Just to conclude my presentation, through the collective power of rural women, we continue to build a movement where every survivor is supported, every girl's dream is protected, and the cycle of poverty and violence are preliminarily broken. I just want to say thank you so much for the platform. I was very nervous, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. No need to have been nervous. You came across so very convincingly.